I'm Andrew Petiprin, Fellow of Popular Culture at the Word on Fire Institute. I've spent my whole life watching movies, and I found that no matter what issues I am facing about myself or the world, films have always helped make sense of things. Movies just make my life better. They entertain me, they inspire me, and they challenge me. I'm also a Christian, and indeed a Catholic. And it's my hope to show why Christian engagement with film should matter. Likewise, it's essential for artists to take account of biblical and ecclesiastical worldviews. But in each episode in this series, my primary goal is to discuss a film or set of films related to the big questions most of us ask, whether we believe in God or not. In this first episode, I want to provide a bit of context. And to do that, we need to back up about 125 years. In 1896, the American inventor William Kennedy Dixon brought his moving picture camera to Rome. During his visit, he made a short film of Pope Leo XIII, making him the first pontiff to appear in a movie. In his brief presence on film, the 86-year-old Pope blessed the camera, marking an encouraging beginning to the long relationship between Christians and cinema that still exists today. 35 years later, Pope Pius XI believed it was time for a robust Christian response to the moral questions connected to mass entertainment. With the onset of talking films and the proliferation of studios and theaters, the movie business was a different animal than it was when Mr. Dixon came to Rome to visit Leo XIII. In 1936, Pope Pius XI offered a thorough treatment of the motion picture, by then the world's most popular entertainment medium. Here, the Pope elaborated on the power of movies, which he said were capable of exercising a profoundly moral influence upon those who see them. He lamented the film industry's failure to produce morally edifying fare, and he commended the now infamous Legion of Decency to police content. By the 1950s and 60s, things had drastically changed yet again. Cinema was not just the most popular means of mass entertainment that needed some policing, but also the most likely medium for the highest artistic expression. Italian neorealism had made a huge splash, and the French New Wave followed at its heels. Post-Stalinist Russian and Polish filmmakers were producing some theologically rich work. In Sweden, Ingmar Bergman was producing one philosophical masterpiece after another. Akira Kurosawa was in his most brilliant and prolific period in Japan. The British film industry was balancing the colorful classics of Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger with the huge tableau vivant of David Lean and the social realist productions by the likes of Tony Richardson. In Hollywood, the studio system was transitioning to a model in which the director was the controlling visionary. Watching movies eventually came to mean not just choosing to join or avoid the masses for bread and circuses. Rather, cinema could instead be more like wandering through a great museum or reading a classic novel. Accordingly, the church's official engagement with film became much more important and much more complicated than playing the part of moral referee. In 1955, the next pope, Pius XII, laid out principles of an ideal film. He began by saying that a film should first of all always contain respect for man, and it should add loving understanding in depicting man's condition. Additionally, he identified a longing for relief within people's souls, and film is uniquely suited as a respite from the pressure of real existence. The Pope reminded filmmakers that the millions of people who flock to the cinema are driven there by a vague hope of finding contentment of their secret and undefined desires. The filmmaker, like the preacher, has a duty to offer spiritual sustenance, to point beyond this world without totally ignoring the harsh reality of the world. The Pope concluded his remarkable discourse by describing the lofty and positive mission of everyone who stands behind the camera: to shun easy material that appeals to base desires and to rise up to worthy ideals. But the thing is, great art, especially in the modern age, does not fare well in stark black and white categories. So really, how do Christians make, watch, and evaluate films and other artistic offerings today? Let us approach the answer by considering Federico Fellini's 1963 film, 8½. 8½, is one of the most famous films about film, and it may be one of the most important pieces of art about art. Its influence was profound on the work of later directors like Martin Scorsese, Terry Gilliam, Tim Burton, David Lynch, and Woody Allen. Importantly, 8½, contains within it the very debate about the moral and spiritual effect of cinema that Pius XI and Pius XII were wrestling with. It should not be surprising, therefore, that in quasi-official ways, the Catholic Church both hated and loved 8½, or rather, first hated it and then loved it. 8½, is the story of Guido Anselmi, played by Marcello Mastroianni, an acclaimed Roman film director. Guido's life is spinning out of control as he enters middle age and tries to make his next masterpiece. His marriage is failing, his vices bore him, and the practicalities of being in charge of a production overwhelm him. A colleague asks him, partly in jest, "What are you cooking up? Another film without hope?" Later, a hanger-on tries to make conversation, asking him, "Could you produce something great on a commission, like if the Pope hired you?" Guido has no reply. 8½, moves through Guido's childhood memories and adult fantasies, with Fellini pulling the audience in and out of Guido's gaze. In the middle of the film, Guido worries about going to see the cardinal, who will determine whether the new film, which he has not even written yet, will face opposition from the church. The cardinal proves to be feeble and uninterested, and he later appears in a dream sequence muttering theological platitudes in a sauna. But his assistant, an intellectually savvy Monsignor, echoes the words of Pope Pius XII. "Yours is a great responsibility." One of the most noteworthy elements of Fellini's film is the intermittent appearance of a pretentious film critic who engages with Guido about art and faith. In one encounter, we find the two men sitting in a cafe together next to a table full of Roman prelates. Guido tells the critic that he is thinking of making a movie about an experience he had as a child, as a way of examining the flaws in the Italian Catholic conscience. In his memory, depicted as a surreal dream sequence in the film, young Guido and a group of friends find a mentally ill prostitute named Saragina and pay her to dance for them. Young Guido gets caught, and he is severely punished at school by his teachers, who are priests. The critic dismisses the mature Guido's idea, telling him that despite his negative memories of being disciplined and made to feel ashamed, his nostalgia has all the intentions of an accomplice. Guido risks accidentally making a pro-church film. And arguably, a pro-church film is exactly what Fellini himself achieved with 8½. The reaction to 8½, was extraordinary. It was given a C, condemned rating by the Legion of Decency, and put on a list that eventually added up to 148 films deemed unacceptable for viewing by Catholics between 1933 and 1980. The condemned list is a hodgepodge of mediocrity, debauchery, and brilliance, ranging from the gritty pre-code film noir to two Alfred Hitchcock movies, Psycho and Torn Curtain. Sergio Leone's spaghetti westerns are on there, along with supernatural films like The Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby, and a few complete head-scratchers, including the Christmas movie Miracle on 34th Street. But the extraordinary thing about 8½, is that it is the one and only film on the Legion of Decency's list that would later appear on another list. We might even say the opposite list. The Vatican Best Film List, published in 1995. 8½, was an easy target for moralists. The film is not obscene, but it is erotic. It does not denigrate humanity or depict people with negativity, but everyone in the picture is lost and broken. And yet, 8.5 is absolutely brilliant, provoking deep contemplation about art and human existence. And it's funny. Fellini even kept a note on the camera during the shoot that read, "Remember, this is a comedy." The great auteur protagonist of the film turns out to be a buffoon. And so what? The egomaniac chooses to get over himself and celebrate life in the end. In Fellini's stunning visual gift, the message embedded in each frame is that divine power still creates new things through broken creatures. As with Michelangelo and Mozart, so with Guido Anselmi. So too with Fellini. The Vatican Best Film list includes 8.5 under the category of art, along with other classics like Jean Renoir's Grand Illusion and Orson Welles' Citizen Kane. The other categories for the 45 films on the list include religion and values, reminding the faithful that different specimens of art serve different purposes. The list features everything from children and family films like Fantasia and The Wizard of Oz, to the most wonderfully tedious art house cult classics like Andrei Rublev and Ordette. The first question we might ask, therefore, is not, is this film approved or condemned, but rather, what is this film seeking to do? The Vatican Best Film list of 1995 was a turning point. We might even identify this moment as the opening of the gates to the kind of cultural evangelism that Robert Barron was about to pioneer, and which the whole Word on Fire movement carries forward today. 4 years after the release of the Vatican Best Film list, in his 1999 letter to artists, St. John Paul II did not mention cinema by name, but his general encouragement reminds us of the role of film in evangelization. His concern was not mainly one of decency and ideals, but of engagement, and of employing different cultural tools for different opportunities to spread the gospel. John Paul emphasized the Church's long history, not only as a patron, but as a consumer of the most beautiful products of the human imagination. And perhaps even more significantly, he identified art not only as something whose truth comes from the Church, but also a source of theology for the Church. The Pope stressed that art needs the Church, but also the Church needs art, in a relationship offered in friendship, openness, and dialogue. The openness to dialogue with cinema is risky for the Church and its evangelists. St. Paul says to the Romans, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind." A film may turn one person's mind to the gospel and yet could be a stumbling block to someone else. 8.5, for example, is not for everyone. And not so much because viewers would be easily scandalized by it. In fact, there's nothing easy about it. Rather, any edifying content within it may be so difficult to discern that the process may seem to some viewers like a waste of time. For others, however, the faith has to be something to extract from the deepest intellectual sources. As St. Augustine counseled, some Christians can live their whole lives on milk, but others need more complex protein from meat. Some filmgoers may benefit from faithful critics' simple up or down on matters of decency. Others are called to engage with more difficult and possibly more morally ambiguous material. Film offers options for both types, and everyone in between. In these episodes, we will consider themes like success, reality, consumerism, doubt, and many others. We will look at popular films like the original Star Wars trilogy and Rocky, along with more obscure titles like Secrets and Lies and My Dinner with Andre. There will be cult classics like Dawn of the Dead, soul-stirring biopics like A Hidden Life, quirky family dramas like The Royal Tenenbaums, and lots more. If you love movies and you love to think about all the big questions, you're going to want to join me on this journey.